Okay, good luck, guys. Play well. Okay, evening everyone. We're just going to wait for a couple of people to come in. We're still waiting for a few more, so bear with us. We'll be with you shortly. Okay, brilliant. I think that's most of the people we're waiting for, so we'll get cracking. So first thing to say is welcome, and thanks for joining us in what are challenging times for everyone. We wanted to put something on really that would be, I guess, a discussion around some of the challenges you're facing in your own world, and the opportunity to pick the brains of a couple of people who are facing it in different worlds as well. Tonight we're going to discuss a couple of things. We're going to talk about, firstly, like surviving this initial kind of period of uncertainty and how you might work and operate and be at your best during this period. We're then going to look at how you might see this as an opportunity to thrive, and explore what other companies are doing to be able to kind of thrive in uncertainty and how they can, I guess, create a competitive advantage. And then finally, we're going to look at how this affects you as a leader and how you're able to kind of lead through these challenging times. We've created quite a small group. We've kept this to the technical directors and the pro license over the last couple of years for tonight's webinar. We are going to record it, so we'll share it with those that can't be on the call tonight. And one of the things I will say at the start is just regarding the technology. We had a webinar last night that was challenging with some of the tech. If you do freeze or you are having problems, log out, log back in straight away, and hopefully that will help. I think it's one of those comedies, isn't it, where you just phone IT and they say turn it off and turn it back on again. I think that's what we'll try and do. So I think that's the kind of brief bit of what I want to talk about at the start. I'm just going to introduce Patrick and Kirk in a second. Before that, Guy's with us this evening. So many of you know Guy Whittingham, who leads the pro license currently, and Guy's going to talk later around and with me host this webinar and picking the brains of both Patrick and Kirk. To get the most out of this, though, we want to try and make it conversational as much as we can. So please use the chat box, which is on the right hand side of your screen, to kind of pop any questions you've got, any thoughts you've got, etc., etc. So just as a start, if you can just sort of say hello to everyone and make sure that you can hear everything, that'd be great. And it'd be great to see who else is in the room as well, and you're able to share with each other. As I introduce both Patrick and Kirk, what I'd like you to do is just kind of in the chat box put a couple of things that you're currently thinking and challenges you're facing. It might be that you've got questions that these guys can help you with, might have some current challenges. Just pop those in the chat box, and then we can come back to those as we go through. So spend a minute or so while I'm introducing the guys to pop some stuff in there. I'm going to introduce Patrick first. So Patrick Marr, some of you will know. Patrick was previously HR director at B&Q, so obviously a huge organisation. But for the last 10 years, has been the owner director of a company called Leading Edge. Leading Edge looked to work with companies and partner with companies to help create high performance through developing people. So they've done a lot of work in a lot of different industries, including sports. And Patrick's team provide a lot of the executive coaches on the technical directors course that we're currently running and have done previous courses. So welcome, Patrick. Thanks for joining us. Introduction number 2 to Kirk Vallis, who many of you will know from his delivery on the pro license and technical directors before. Kirk has probably my dream job, which is global head of creativity development at Google, which sounds pretty cool. He also advises boards such as Adidas and other organisations. He's worked with us on a number of projects, as well as other sporting organisations such as England Rugby. So we're delighted to have kind of both Kirk and Patrick tonight to share their thoughts and share their views on the issues we're facing, and how we can perhaps make the most of them to help you be as good as you can be. Guy, have I missed anything on the intro? Is there anything I need to add?
No, I think you've covered it all, David.
Excellent, thank you. Well, do you want to kick off with the first question? And make sure it's not to Kirk, because he's just gone.
Yeah, breaking up every now and again. Like we're going to have these problems. No, yeah. So we're going to go into basics in surviving. So my first question is, what are the top 3 tips you have done to remain effective? Now, Kirk, if you're there, that'd be great. But I think it's going to be Patrick first on this one, because Kirk's disappeared.
Is that true? Kirk, are you there? No, he's gone.
I'm here. I just told my.
Oh, yes, there.
Perfect.
I've got South London internet. So it's been used up. So I've just taken myself off the screen. But I'm here. But you go ahead. Or
No, crack on. You start your
Okay. So I think the biggest learn here is, and it sounds really simple. So sorry to patronise, but it's a different skill. Working from home is a different skill. I was trying to think of an analogy to your world. It's like 5-a-side and 11-a-side. Fundamentally the same sport, but totally different skills. And I just see people that have been admittedly forced into this uncertain and different times, and they're trying to sort of recreate the same cadence, the same office. It's a very different skill. So my one first tip is give yourself a break, right? It isn't going to go well if you might sit down to do something for 3 hours. You might go, right, I'm going to plan pre-season. I've got some hiring I've got to do. I'm going to plan that. And the chances are the tech won't work. You'll be disrupted by kids. Just laugh about it. Just like you just can't let it get to you. It's not going to be perfect. So that's top tip number one. Top tip number two, chunk it up. Now, you read lots about people working 20-minute chunks, 50-minute chunks. The point is, your chances of being able to focus in a room or in your lounge or wherever you're doing this, wherever you're basing yourself for 2 hours or something, it just is unrealistic. I give myself a really deliberate and emphasized target. So when I sit down to do something, I visualize in an hour's time, I'm going to be at the kettle, making a cup of tea and switching off from this. So I think it's really important. And if you are lucky enough to be able to focus for a whole day on stuff, well, then that's easy. It's six 1-hour chunks with 20 minutes of checking in on social media or going for a walk around the garden or doing what you need to do. So chunk it up is the second tip. And lastly, just on that point I just made, move. Don't forget to move. I know it sounds simple, but it's move. Not only do we need it, most of you work in the physical environment, so you're used to this, but we are 100 years ago, 90% of people in a city like London did jobs that required movement. 100 years on, it's the opposite. Only 10% of us are actually working jobs that require movement, and most of you are quite lucky in that. So it's no wonder when we find ourselves sat still for too long, we feel like caged animals. So don't forget to move, even if that means, the current rules mean you can't get outside as much. Pace around your house while you're on the phone or thinking through some stuff. But we know there's a science that our physical state directly impacts our mental state, and so don't forget or don't neglect that as part of your working day.
Brilliant, thanks.
Great, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks. Hi guys. Yeah, I totally agree with what I just heard Kirk say there. One of the things that struck me in this is I would say do understand your own preferences. So like a lot of people, I've been sort of going through my Twitter feed and having a look at all the great advice and turn a bedroom into an office and work in certain specific chunks and so on, and avoid distractions, etc. And then I kind of realised that actually I look for distractions in my working week. So if I wanted to think about something, I'd probably go out of the office and go into a busy coffee shop and just soak up a bit of atmosphere. I like to throw things around with other people. I like a change of environment. So I would say, listen to some of the advice, but just recognise, your own preferences and find your own rhythm based on that. So that would be, I guess, point one. I think point two, I would say, be really careful, challenge the conventions. So I think it's very easy. We've all known perhaps a retired parent or grandparent that sort of still has to put a tie on every day and still has to go through the same routine because it's sort of what we've done. And I think there is a danger here that we keep the same working hours because it's sort of, we're trying to find the routine and perhaps try and do things in the same way. So I generally in life I find it really odd that most businesses manage to get all of their work exactly into 8 hours every day, 5 days per week. Every time we run a workshop, somehow everything just fits between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. When we have an hour's meeting, we manage to get it finished just at the end of 1 hour. And I don't really think life does work like that. I think we've ended up moving the working week to suit travel and other things. So yeah, if you work best at 5 in the morning, or you want to spend more time with the kids in the day and work in the evening, and that can fit with what you're doing, I would say challenge the conventions. And then the final one I'd say is I'd say embrace the opportunities. So don't know if anyone else has found this, but I've found this huge connection with my kids that I don't normally have, running lessons with them and doing yoga and all sorts of things I wouldn't normally do. And I'm really loving that. I'm really enjoying that. Who knew it was going to be exciting to find one piece of exercise you could do every day and make sure you maximise it out of the house. So yeah, I think, embrace the opportunities that it's given us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Patrick. Okay, I guess leads really well to the next question, which is, I guess, what's the unintended positive outcome that's coming? I mean, I've certainly seen some. I feel perhaps greater connected to my team because I know more about their house. What are the kind of unintended positive consequences you guys have seen from your teams? And I guess I'd open that up to the group as well. Is there anything that's positive so far that's come out of this that you think, okay, I've now understand that a bit better, or any positive consequences? Patrick, do you want to take that first? Yeah, sure. So I think there are certain things we're going to get better at. So we're all better at washing our hands and singing happy birthday. That's a thing. But definitely the whole virtual world. So, my 74-year-old mum yesterday was, FaceTiming the kids for the 4th or 5th time. I did catch her at one point. So she got a camera and she was my dad was holding the iPad and she was trying to take a photograph of what was on there. Right? And I explained the screenshot to her. She blew it away. So I think if you translate that to the workplace, there's a number of us that perhaps flirted around the edges of virtual stuff that are just going to get really good at it really quickly. I think in businesses we'll work out that when we close a head office, lots of things still happen, and we'll ask ourselves a question whether certain functions really need to be done in the way that they're done. So I think there'll be some big opportunities. When we're forced to do something different, think different. I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's a good one, sort of family connections, connecting in different ways. I'm already seeing things that I hope I'll remember and take into when the world spins back in its normal way, that I'll take some of these learnings. And then the final one, I think you touched on it, David, I would agree with, is I think mostly when I'm talking to leaders and they're trying to develop their leadership, they're often looking at how do I collaborate better? How do I show more vulnerability and authenticity? And I think actually when you're in a time that nobody knows the right answers to, it really pushes you and allows you to develop your leadership in that way. So I would really say many of us will come out as better leaders, having led in a time where we just don't know the answer. And so, yeah, that's, I think, a good opportunity. Fantastic. Thanks. And Kirk, anything from you?
Yeah, I think it's listen, we've been disrupted. It's funny because I work mostly in the corporate world, and I know it's quite different to football, but there's one thing I've heard so every time I interact with people on the pro license or the technical director course, people go, yeah, but this is football. This is how it's done in football. And actually, that's no different to business. The point is, we've established a status quo of how things are done around here for actually 100 years plus in some cases, and we now have, and what we've learned, what we know is changing that through desire is actually quite hard. It's been forced on us, and I think that's a brilliant thing. So actually, anything that you kind of looking at and you go, we just do that because it's the way it's always done. I'd love to change it, but it will never change. And I've heard people tell me that, people that I've mentored on the technical director program, etc. You now have that chance to do it differently. So I wouldn't look at this time as thinking, how do I get through the next 3 months by working differently? My framing currently is, how does this help me to totally change the way I think about, so in my case, learning programs? I've been wanting to do online learning and YouTube-based facilitation techniques, etc., for ages. It's been forced on me now. Some people might remember, on those of you that have been in sessions with me, I talk about a principle called break the rules, where you take a principle and what if you blew it up? You know, what if we had to beat New Zealand 100 points to nil in the case of rugby? Well, actually, if I said to you, what if your club closed down virtually for 3 months? You'd all laugh at me, but actually that's happened. So how do we use that as provocation to go, well, how do we do it differently? Do we always have to go into the training ground to do our work? Or actually, could next season I do some of my thinking time, or the planning sessions happen away from the training ground, et cetera, et cetera? So I think this is, we've been forced, innovation happens when we're disrupted, and we've been forced this disruption. So see that as a good thing, because it probably wouldn't happen, because nobody rarely gets fired for doing the same thing. But I guarantee you, the people that are most successful next season are the people that, I bet my house on it, are the people that do a couple of things differently as a result of being forced through this time, versus just going back to everything being the same way.
Yeah, really good framing of how we can look at this, Kirk. And what I'm keen to do is try and make sure that the vast knowledge that's in the room also get to share stuff. So I've got a question. If you can write your answer in the chat box, that'd be great, as we kind of segue into the next bit. But it's, what have you done that you'd advise others to do during this first kind of week or so? What's the thing you've done or implemented that's been positive for yourself and maybe others that you'd recommend other people doing? So if you've got anything you want to share, it'd be great if we could start to kind of learn from each other as much as from Patrick and Kirk this evening. We're then going to move on to kind of how we might thrive in this situation as well. So while people, I'm sure, share their wisdom, Guy?
Yeah. So on the back of what Kirk said, really, about disrupting things, Patrick, what are you seeing yours doing the most of this situation?
So I think what are we doing in this situation to sort of maximise it? I think the first piece that we've done is actually just a bit of a goal setting piece. So I know it sounds obvious, but I don't know if everybody's done this. We sort of sat down and went, we need to define winning for the next 12 weeks. So we effectively sell leadership development activities. Whilst maybe typically 10 or 20% of our stuff is online, 80% of our business is about getting people together in rooms, often globally, flying people around and so on. So we are suddenly, we suddenly have a little or no income. So that's where we are. And we're likely to be in this space, let's assume, for say 12 weeks. So what we've done is said, well, what is a win in those 12 weeks? And it's been really interesting because some of our early thoughts changed quite significantly. So our early thoughts were all about how do we save money? How do we make sure that we put ourselves into a reasonable sort of fitness state financially? And so we took out some of the discretionary things that we felt we could do without. So, for example, a new website or an improved website. When we redefined what winning looked like, and we said, look, in 12 weeks' time, when these doors open again, our win will be to be the fastest to the client, with the right offer and the right sort of help, and put ourselves in the best position to start helping people through recovery, and therefore develop our business. And when will we ever have another chance to sit down and really improve the website? And the first thing we're going to do is drive people to that website. So we've ended up setting some goals for 12 weeks that I would never have guessed we'd have done. So similar to something that Kirk was saying earlier, we're going to get some stuff done we wouldn't otherwise have done. And that feels really exciting. So that was the first thing. We've reinvented our working practice, mentioned it earlier on. A lot of our practices, I think, revolve around logistics. So the three directors meet on a Monday because we don't live in a similar location, and we pack all of our sort of weekly activity into a Monday, and we spend a day together on a Monday, and that really suits us, and we enjoy the connection points. Doesn't make any sense logistically, virtually. The time, and I would say that is right. I would say think about the type of communication you're doing. So for us, we've moved to what we would call sense making, so less sort of top down and letting people know things, and more getting people in forums to actually discuss things and make sense of them. So I guess they would be my key bits.
Kirk, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was actually also trying to read all the points on the right-hand side. I hope we'll touch on some of those because they're brilliant.
Well, feel free to touch on them.
I'm loving the use of Zoom. I don't know if anyone's seen Zoom's share price is doing pretty well at the moment. It's one of the few that is. So, which you can probably imagine why. So for me, I think like how do we making the most of this time? So if you think of Google and other organizations, actually most organizations, even some of your clubs, will have spent a lot of time and money on designing the environment so that you have these collisions, and that's not happening. So we have to be really deliberate about the casual collisions we have at work. So, you know, whereas we might bump into somebody in the canteen that we don't normally speak to, that might just give us a bit of a perspective, actually, we have to be deliberate about that. So one of the big bits of advice I would give myself and everyone, and we're seeing this at Google, is like every day, whoever I spoke to for a while, and just pick up the phone to them, drop them an email and say, can we have 15 minutes on the phone, or, you know, a virtual coffee or something, and just love to connect. This, you know, most of us have put tons of people in our address book that we'd love to get the phone to, but we've left it so long that it feels a bit awkward. This time we'll actually sort of get over that. And the point is, don't be thinking, oh, I need to speak to somebody because I wanted to talk to them about this point for ages. Just almost make it random. Go through your contacts on your phone and just see who I haven't spoken to for ages, and pick up the phone and just get a perspective from them, because the watch out is this happened. So when a few years ago, got a new CEO, and the first thing is she allowed everyone to work from home, and everyone globally did loads. And guess what? Productivity was deemed to have increased. So everyone was like, I'm brilliant. Like, I'm getting loads done. I'm getting through all my emails. But guess what? Creativity went down because nobody was like colliding or having those conversations around the stuff that they're working on. So I think that's the big thing here is you'll get into a rhythm and you'll feel like you're on top of things. But the watch out is that innovation and creativity stop. So I would definitely force myself to do that. And one thing, just on the points that others have made, and I'm a bit biased here, but I need reassurance from my boss, whoever that is. You know, it's why I still continue to work for Google and don't solely work on my own. And you'll have some people who would work with you who don't need that, but I guarantee there'll be some that do, and they'll probably be struggling a little bit by that lack of daily exposure to you, and just that kind of informal coffee, you know, like some people get. I'll be honest here. There are days when I'm feeling a bit down, a bit in some work, and just having a chat with my boss and knowing their tone of voice and that they're on good form with me makes me go, okay, great. No, actually, everything's all good. That's just the voices in my head. And people aren't getting that. There'll be some people in your team who are probably starting to get off into a downward spiral. So you probably can't overdo the contact. And I'm loving the fact I saw Sean joining the players WhatsApp, which you haven't done. What a brilliant thing to do! Some of you, football's quite a hierarchical game business, I would say, from my exposure to it, and some of you have probably felt yourself in leadership roles where you've just had this barrier come up between you and your teams. Perhaps you might not have it's just happened. This is probably the time where you could start to show a bit of vulnerability and start to break down some of those barriers, because I guarantee there are people that will probably really be needing it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know I'm certainly one of those as well, Kirk. So I think one of the questions I've got linked to the comments in the chat box, which is really cool. So people talk about scheduling, like diarising meetings and getting a good kind of how do we get the balance with like that formalized, right, everyone's got a set chunk of time in their diary for meetings versus that casual, just a catch up? Like, is everything all right? Like, what's the balance in that? Is there a kind of a balance to be struck? What are your thoughts on that?
Was that for me? Sorry, David.
Oh yeah, sorry. Patrick, do you want to go first then, Kirk? Sorry, I forgot the vital point of hosting.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that actually. I noticed, Steve's made a good point. It sometimes feels at this time like you can be up at 7 a.m. and still there at 7 at night, and you haven't left the screen. And I suspect we might talk about it a little bit later, David, about how you organise a really good virtual meeting. Did you want to cover that now, or do you want to cover that a bit later?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to cover that now. Let's,
so I think one of the things that we noticed is we started doing virtual meetings maybe 2 or 3 years ago. One of our big clients, Mars, is quite a global business. They worked out that it wasn't the greatest idea in the world to keep flying people from, sort of all over the world, and start to challenge us to say, why can't we do some of this stuff virtually? And I have to say, I sort of came to it a bit kicking and screaming. So I'm a guy who likes to be in a room with people, sort of looking them in the eyes and seeing all the body language and understanding sort of what's going on. Also very keen on facilitating things with great energy, creating lots of movement, getting people in groups and so on. And actually, once we really got our heads around it, what we realised is if you challenge yourself in it, I would actually ask, and happy to take any questions in the chat. Is there anything that you would want to do in a room that you can't do virtually? So that was the question that we asked ourselves. So I guarantee you, Steve, that the people also looking at the same screens as you are also thinking, my back is hurting. I wish I didn't have to sit here in the same way. Surely there's a better way of doing this. And I think it's like any sort of meeting. I think it's a bit of bravery to say, let's do something different. So things that I've seen done very well in virtual meetings, there's nothing stopping you creating breakouts. So all of the facilities that you've got will allow you to have separate rooms. If there's 12 people in a meeting, there's no reason at all why you can't have half an hour, 4 groups of 3, doing some sort of walking and doing some sort of breakout activities and coming back. If, like us, you like to get people walking and moving, make that a TC, so give them a telephone number. Get them to get out and get moving, whatever that looks like. I appreciate you may not be able to get right out of the house, but take a walk around the garden, take a walk around the house, put your earphones in and get some movement. Most of the facilities we have on here for a polling, for example, so you can preset some polls around things like kind of do a temperature check. Are people ready for a break now? Who's ready for a break? Who's not ready for a break? Who agrees with this point? Who doesn't agree with this point? There's a lot of parts of the tech which we don't tend to use perhaps at first, but maybe discover them. Whiteboard's really interesting. I'd also say, what's better about it? Like not having to all get on a plane or a car or travel to a place is a hell of a time saving. So, but that's often the time that you get to think. So actually, I think a couple of you made the point. Actually, making sure that you break up those days and give yourself those meetings, give yourself some thinking time. And I suppose the only other thing I would say is that if I'm running a meeting, one of the things that I'm always interested in is how can we bring energy. So there might be a game, it might be physically looking at something, a clip. It might be lots of breaks. I would say those rules apply more in this scenario. So. We personally wouldn't leave anybody sitting for more than 45 minutes if you can help it, before we just stop everything, let people have a bit of a break. Creating something to physically look at or an activity to do or some form of movement is great. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, David, but I think the biggest shift for me was actually challenging yourself and asking yourself, what can't you do virtually? Because there's very little, I think. Yeah,
sounds good. Kirk, any thoughts?
Oh, loads of thoughts. So first, actually, there's a watch out here. We've been forced to use video conferencing so much that we just become obsessed with it and we forget about the telephone. Actually, does the meeting have to be a video conference? If there's 2 of you, I don't know about you, I'm going to own it. I know I'm not alone, but my ego, I actually spend most of my time looking at my picture, not the other people on the screen. And it's because we're the last generation of people that are a bit like, we're not, a bit funny about how we look on screen and so on. And so So the tech doesn't always work as we are experiencing every day. So don't fall into that trap and that river of thinking of we must meet using the latest tech. Actually, just get on the phone, and what you lose in the ability to see somebody, you gain in the ability to move, to just to chat things through and so on. So I think that I would definitely say something around that. There was a couple of other things that I saw people that were saying formal meetings. Sorry, I was just looking at some of the timers as well. I think there's a big thing here about like experiment. Like this is a brilliant chance. Again, if there's another thing I often hear when I'm working with some of you folks, it's the pressure to win, right? And that, so in my world, I work in innovation. Half my time is spent trying new stuff and it might not work. It feels like your world doesn't give you that ability easily. This is a time to experiment, to do it. So actually be deliberate. But Patrick sort of said it, like change the game, change the rules, or the reason what good looks like. So make sure that you don't get to the end of this period when everything goes back. Maybe it's next season, everything's back to normal, and you go, I wish I used that time to try this or to do this or to try something. To be really deliberate. Don't ask yourself, what's the experiment I want to do? Not just with how you work, but just maybe in the way that you run your team or how you get great impact. Because in a time of disruption like this, people are expecting things to be a bit different. So you'll get away with it a bit more. So try some new stuff with how you lead your teams and do things a bit different.
Can I just jump in on there as well, David? I think listening to Kirk there, I was just looking at some of the questions as well, or some of the provocations. I think there's some really good ones there. The thing that you feel like you miss is the sort of the interpersonal bits of conversation that you get that are sort of around an informal meeting. You have a 15-minute break and you get a chance to meet someone at the coffee machine and chat, whatever. Definitely get that. Reiterating what Kirk said, I think there's a bravery thing here. It's a little bit like if you have ever done a best man speech, you know that it'll be best if you get up and you give it gusto and you tell some jokes and so on. And if you bottle it, you end up just putting your head down and getting through it. And I think virtual meetings are like that. So if you're brave and you try things, there is no reason why you can't have lunch together in the same way as you would normally do. There's no reason why you can't say, we're going to leave the screen on. If you want to get a break, get a break. If you want to chat about nothing, then stay with us. There's no reason why you can't set up discussion groups. I'm currently in a book club of all things. Never thought I would say that, where some guys at work have said, why don't we read the same book instead of reading different books? And then why don't we just have a bit of a chat about it on one of the dates? The family stuff's really interesting as well. So we would often ask teams to try and share a bit more about their family lives and so on. And all of a sudden, we've got this great opportunity, haven't we? We can bring kids to the screen and we can say, this is my little one. What have you got to say to the gang? These are people I work with. And that's a fantastic way to get to know people. I've been doing some virtual tours of people's houses, just impromptu, because we're chatting and you can see some things in the background and so on. So I think it's up to you how formal or informal you make a meeting, whether it's in a room or on a screen. And I'll go back to what Kirk said. Be brave. It's different anyway. So try something really different and see how it works.
Brilliant. I really like Raddy's point. I don't know if you've picked up on that, Kirk, as well, around challenging yourself to find something new about a player that you didn't know or a member of staff. I think that's how you can kind of make it into a game.
I just saw that myself as well. And it just made me think of an idea. I think Leeds United did it. I don't know if there's anyone on the call from there. And I know that the folks at Brentford, I was talking to Rasmus and they were thinking about it as well, something similar. But didn't the folks at Leeds do something where every player had to go and spend time with a regular supporter who, and I think their thing was like, someone who earns in a year what we earn in a week and that kind of stuff. And again, back to that point about experimenting and just doing things a bit different. Is this an opportunity not just to reach out? This situation has definitely caused a change of our mentality. We're being more open. We're sharing. Everyone's letting their emotions out, mainly for good. So could you be getting, somebody also said, how do I keep my players who are at home engaged and so on? Could you be thinking things like that? Could they be setting up phone calls with, random supporters or people in the community or so on, and get a feel for, we always know that all of us probably on this call, whatever our job is or the role that we play in sport or business, we're probably all pretty privileged. And how do we just ensure that our bubble doesn't actually become even bigger through the isolation? Let's see what's going on for those around us. And I'm sure there's people, we're all missing football. What's it like for those that it literally was their focal point, or the thing that kind of kept them going each week or gave them their thing? So maybe not just players, but have how can you set up something that helps you to kind of stay connected to the world around, and not just through social media, where there's probably an element of false and best self and all that kind of stuff there, maybe.
So Patrick and Kirk, let's go to Patrick first. If you were to nail it down to a couple of points of what you'd be doing now in terms of having the biggest impact, what would they be?
So the biggest impact with our teams, are you thinking? Yeah. So what
just
two. Yeah, I would say the first.
Your top two.
Yeah, top two. Okay. I think the first thing I would do is I would really help them to accept or accept together as a group that the game's changed, and so we have to play differently. So if we haven't noticed that the game's changed and we just carry on turning up and trying to play how we used to play, I would say we lose. We don't even know if we're going to lose, because we haven't defined the win. So I think you have to sort of pause and say, let's define the win over the next period of time. So I think doing that together as a group is awesome. I think the second one for me is I would challenge yourself to be a sense maker. So I would say don't challenge yourself to have the answer, challenge yourself to help make sense of the problems, if that makes sense. So unearth the problems and then help people to work them through. So don't, if you're doing it now, stop trying to get the answer, but be a part of the sense making. And I'm going to squeeze a third one in, Guy, if that's okay. So I'm guessing from the context of your teams that everybody's a bit competitive. And I think if you're going to change the way you do your meetings, a very good way of doing that is to challenge the guys to come up with some stuff. So I've noticed in my homeschooling that actually the easiest way to get the kids to do some stuff is to get them to organise the game, work the game out, make it a competition, decide how they're going to score it, that sort of thing. And so I would be saying, I want to bring more energy to these meetings. I want to bring more life to the discussions. I challenge John, or I challenge Jane, to come up with something at the next meeting that gets us up, that gets us moving, that gets us sharing things, that gets us doing something. I want it to be 10 minutes long. That's my challenge to you. We'll start the meeting next time like that. So I would be not. Don't take it on you, is what I'm saying. Create the environment where it can happen. Yeah.
Kirk, do you think you could keep it to two?
No, definitely not.
Not a chance. Not if it's a rule.
So I think big thing I'm trying to be is a better equitable leader. Or what I mean by that is it's actually great leadership. Like I've kind of realised it's not about treating everyone the same. What it is about is treating everyone fairly. And great people don't think alike. So you're going to have some people in your teams who are extroverts, who like to talk it out loud. Someone put it in the group. Like to talk it out loud, need that interaction. And you're going to have some people that doesn't work for them as much, and they want reflection and gestation and just being able to think about stuff. So you have to design for both. So something I've set myself a bit of a mantra: time to think, time to talk. And am I one doing that for myself? So creating more deliberate thinking time. I'll ask a question. I don't need people to answer it, but I'll ask a question to the group. Who's got a to-do list? I'm guessing most people. Who's got to think about this? So actually, how do we use this time to actually use what we're probably paid for, most of us on this call, our brains? And so how do we just spend a bit more time thinking, but also how do we ensure that when we are having these meetings, that just remember, some people will be loving the interaction. Some people will probably just want bit of time to think about stuff that's being said and process it. So, you know, have a halftime break. I've started having halftime breaks in hour-long meetings. Have a halftime break, because it just allows those that need that time, that moment of reflection, to go and make a cuppa and think through it. And I guarantee that the chances of them then contributing to the discussion will improve dramatically, because you've given them a moment to rehearse their thoughts without the pressure of it being live and in the moment. We'll learn a lot about ourselves during this time, and just remember that great minds don't think alike. You've got different types of people. We've got to design. There's no way around it. You've got to design for both.
Brilliant. That is a great principle to take into when we go back into the world as it was perhaps before, whether it'll ever be the same again. But those designing for different individuals is a key component. I've got a quick question for the rest of the group, which is, I guess, what's your biggest concern with being a leader and leading other people during this period? So what are the biggest things you're thinking, yeah, I'm not sure that's, as a leader, that's a real issue for me, or a concern? So if you can just it'd be great if people can share what their concerns around leading during this period would be. I'll share one of mine. One of my concerns with my staff is, like, how do I know that they're going to do what we need them to do? That's one of my concerns. But I got to get comfortable with that. I might not know that, and I understand that. But it'd be great to share your kind of concerns. Guy, I think you've got the next one as we move on to kind of being brilliant at leading people during this period.
Yeah, what is different about leading remotely, and what are the common concerns, Kirk? So leading remotely. You know, what are you concerned about, Kirk, leading remotely, or are you quite happy that it's people having to do something different?
Actually, so sorry, I've kind of our answers have kind of merged, and I just was talking about that there. So I think it is just, I'll be really quick, just to stress, it's not the same. So don't go into a one-to-one or a weekly catch-up with a report that you might normally do face-to-face, and give it no planning at all. Think about it. Think about how it's going to be different. Like, it's a new muscle that we've got to build. So I think that's the biggest thing here, is it's different. And just, I think we're all smart people. We're all successful. So just giving yourself that time to think, how is this going to be different, and what could I do to ensure it's as impactful or close to as impactful will likely mean that you'll get that. And I just think back to that point around thinking time. If you can give as much, so if you are going to jump on a call with somebody, just send them in advance, a day ahead or whatever, what you want to talk about, so that they've got that evening, or we're all going to be in different routines where we're, going for our walk. We've all got this one exercise we can do a day. So, and it's all going to be at different times. So, even sharing the agenda for a meeting or the stuff you want people to think about in advance, it will just mean that they can think about it and then come more prepared to contribute and bring juicy stuff to the meeting. And just on your point, David, about how do we ensure people get their stuff done, I think this is a time to trust your hiring, right? It blows my mind that people, by the way, Google used to do 16 interviews. We don't anymore. But the one thing that we do 4 now, everyone has 4 interviews, but it used to be 16. But I guarantee you, once you were in, you were trusted and left to kind of like manage yourself. And so you probably are the same. You will have spent a lot of time on recruitment, whether that's players or people or what the staff around you. Trust them. And I think, but what you can do is we have an expression, excuse the kind of the jargon, we call it flying freely within a gilded cage. So what we mean by that is be really explicit about what we expect from a situation and what good looks like. Creativity actually loves constraints. So let's lock in all the parameters or the restrictions or what's going on and what good looks like, but then leave people to just fly within that space. Don't micromanage. You can't anyway, so you'll just end up doing it in a clunky way. So be really clear, and then give people the space to actually to thrive and work them on how they want to work.
Great. Patrick.
Yeah, so I guess just to add to that, the thing that I was thinking about in terms of how do we manage differently. So one of the things that we talk about a lot leading edge when we talk about leadership is we talk about leadership being all about the paradox. So what I mean by paradox, so paradox is two things that sort of are opposites, but they have to live together. So if you were teaching, so my eldest daughter is she's a Holiday rep, she's a Ibiza Holiday rep, she's just become a supervisor, and she was saying to me, you know, what advice have you got around leadership? And I was just chatting to her about it, and one of the things I was trying to help her with was just the paradox. So I said to her, you know, do you think when you've got a team, you need to be close to your team? So she said, yes. I said, do you think when you've got a team, you need to have a little bit of distance from your team? So she said, yes. I said, okay, so they're opposites, aren't they? So, but you're right, you do need to do both of those things, and that's a paradox. And what you'll have to do is understand where are you on those things. And I think what happens when we're leaders in whatever context is we work out what are our paradoxes. So for me, it might be I need to have a strategic plan on business development, and I need to be absolutely getting every opportunity that's in front of me. And I need to navigate which of those is important. So that paradox is not important to me right now because I have no opportunities in front of me in that context. So what I've had to do is think about what are our current paradoxes. So I'll tell you a couple of mine, and maybe you can think of your own. So I think if you can work out what your paradoxes are for this time, you'll be able to lead better. So for me, one of them is that I feel like it's important for me as the leader to be really positive. And I think it's really important for me to be very realistic in terms of outcomes. Some of the outcomes for guys who work in our industry could be pretty tough. So I've got to be both very realistic and very positive, even though they're opposites. With clients, I think we need to be really close to them at this time because it's a really difficult time for them. We can help, and we need to give them distance. We need to give them space because they need to work some stuff out. So again, it's a paradox. In terms of the team that work with me, I'd like us to be really productive in this time. And I think the real win will be on the other end of this time. So I'd like us to come back refreshed, having had some time out. So I want us to be really productive, but I want us to enjoy this time and embrace it for what it is and be relaxed. And there are three paradoxes for me. So I would challenge you to say, what are your paradoxes of leadership in this time? And then how are you managing across that spectrum?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And that, I guess that leads me to a paradox of mine around challenge and support. So I feel like a lot of people talk about the support element at the moment, which is absolutely right. And one of the things I'll be interested in your thoughts on is how like I feel quite comfortable being able to challenge people when we're in a room and things like that. It feels harder to challenge virtually. Like when we're sat in front of the screen, so to say, I disagree. Is there anything you can think about regarding that? Is it just a support process at the moment, or do we still need to be pushing and challenging? Patrick, do you want to go first?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know if I've got an answer to that exact one, David. I think the first thing I thought when you said it was, when the world changes, I think the first thing you got to really do is just challenge your own assumptions. So my challenge to you would be that is your assumption. So I personally don't think it's more difficult. Could make a case that it's easier because you are having to hold the person in that space. I think it's easier to take breaks, which often are difficult in confrontational sort of moments. You're often still in each other's space. So I think there's an opportunity to call something and say, we disagree on this. Shall we go away and have a think about it? Shall we come back in another half an hour and have a look at it? So I guess my challenge is anything that you have in that space, it will be real, but just check if it's an assumption and a belief. And I think at the moment, I'm finding myself all over the place making assumptions, whether they're to do with what I think the client's going to do next, or whether I think it was a super reframe earlier when Kirk was talking about people needing reassurance. I definitely have some needs, but one of them isn't necessarily reassurance, so I forget that other people do. So that's something that I definitely need. I kind of need to know that I'm part of a gang. It's a different thing, I guess. So I need to know that people still want to be around me and talk to me, and that's my sort of vulnerability in that area. But reassurance isn't something I would have thought about, but I made a note there because it's helpful. So I would have made the assumption that people don't need that. So I don't know if that answers it.
No, that does, yeah. Kirk, anything from you?
Yeah, so if we think about some of the work that we've done at Google around high-performing teams, so every few years we reevaluate the attributes of the highest performing teams within our organization, and every single, the top two things have always been, since I think we started doing it about 8 years ago. And every time we do this study, the top two things that high performing teams have is, number one, a good manager, a good leader. And actually, number two is good leader. Number one is psychological safety. So to your point, David, and it sounds like lots of people are doing that, right? So what you just have to remember is that if you are going to have a meeting that might be or a conversation or an engagement that's challenging, or where you want to invite challenge, there's a big difference between teamwork and collaboration. Teamwork suggests people know their role, they know their position. Collaboration actually is about creating an environment where people can collide diverse perspectives together that don't always agree, but actually with the common goal of getting to really good output. And so just ask yourself, if you know you want to create an environment or an engagement where you want challenge for whatever reason, just ensure that you are also doubling down on creating psychological safety. And it needs to be authentic. Doing an icebreaker and then telling someone they're really performing poorly in their role isn't authentic. So just have that. And I think, again, there is some, maybe this is my assumption to Patrick's point, but I always feel like I'm less in flow over video. So and I know that there is some evidence to suggest that a lot of people have that, again, just because it's a new skill. So we're using a lot more of our conscious brain just to navigate the skill of how we are on camera or in this type of environment. And so if you are going to bring up a difficult conversation or a tough ask, or you want to grapple with something, back to my point, give people that heads up in advance. If you're going to be having a tough conversation with someone about their performance or their role, don't leave them hanging for too long. Or even just go, I just want to set it up. This is what this conversation is going to be about. Don't blindside them because you won't get the best out of people. So don't forget, just psychological safety, and everything that I'm hearing and reading that people are doing, like, don't undervalue it. And I guess back to that point, do not let it go when you get back to normal. Like, that is definitely something. Don't feel like once you're back to normal, you go, oh, well, that was that. I showed a lighter side because we were in tough times. Actually, you'll lose any authenticity and credibility that you might have established during this time if you do that.
That's a really good point.
One of the things I'd like to ask is, before we leave this, and it's been some great discussion, is what we're taking out of this. What are the main points that people are thinking about? So text in and a couple of points of maybe what's come on to you. If I think about something, for me, it's around football people have routines and habits, and they're hugely broken at the moment, not being able to go in in the early morning, going to the gym, then you set up your coaching session or chat with the coaches about what you're going to do, or any last minute changes, setting up, then have lunch, then afternoon. There's routines you go through. What are people thinking about how their routines are now, and are they going to change when they go back to work? Are you going to do things differently? One of the things I'm trying to grapple with is, I think Steve Guinan mentioned it earlier, around about being on this on your computer for 12 hours during the day. Find yourself a time during the day to make it a habit. I don't know, whatever time in the day to get some fresh air. Go for your, Boris has allowed us one set of exercise a day. Can we go and do that in a couple of hours at a certain time, or whatever it might be? So that's what I'm taking out of this, I think, is to make sure that organize my day as much as you can in advance, but make sure I have some time to go and get some exercise and clear your head, like Patrick and Kirk have said. Really, take yourself away from it to give you time, that creative thinking. If you can, get on the bike or go on a bike ride, and that might just clear your head to think about something else.
Yeah, really good point, Guy. I think the thing for me that's really resonated, and it's in the chat box as well, is that understanding the paradox that Patrick talked about. So we want people to know we're there for them, but we also need to give them space, and that kind of balance between the two. And I guess it's an opportunity to get to know your staff really well and know what they might need from you as a leader, which, as Kirk then said, was, don't then forget that when you go back to normal, if it goes back to a new normal. But yeah, really keen to, if anyone's got any other thoughts to kind of wrap up what they've been thinking about. My final question to Patrick first, then to Kirk, is kind of like, can you like go back to the top 2 things you think in terms of either leadership or yourself that will kind of wrap up this section? What are 2 things that you think people should be going away and perhaps considering or implementing straight away? Hopefully I've given enough padding there for you to be able to think of that answer to that. Patrick, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing that springs to mind, David, when you say it is that, so this is where my head is I think there's a lot of people at the moment looking at the problem. And so you look at the problem, you go, this is the problem. And then you try and mitigate the problem. I think the win is how do we win the bit after the problem? So I would guarantee you, if I don't know, I assume, I've never worked in football, that your season goes better if your pre-season is brilliant. So if you pause and say, okay, we've got this period of time now, which might not be ideal for us, but at some point we come out of it, and we all come out of it the same. I assume your world is as competitive as my world, and we have a chance to use the problem time to win the time after the problem. So that would be my first thing: is you get your head into what's the recovery look like, and therefore what could you be doing in this time. For us in business, for example, we have a very strong sense that that business starts with great relationships. So actually, this is a brilliant time to build relationships. It might not be a brilliant time to build business, but it's a brilliant time to build relationships. So if we're true to what we believe in, all the investment in relationships now will pay off in the next 5 years or whatever. Similarly, I've got a mate who's in a much more sort of cutthroat type of business, and he talks about when he sees the swing of the economy, he looks to grab market share at the worst points. So at the worst points, he believes he'll look after his people better, he'll steal people from the competitors, he'll be ready to go faster than anybody else, and he'll gain market share in this sort of time that is difficult, and he'll benefit from that in the upswings. Now, I don't know what your comparison is with football, but I'm sure there is one. So I'd say win this time for the next time. And the final one is, I think it's a similar point, but I just want to sort of make it, is that I've been hugely impressed when I've worked with young players, particularly more in rugby, actually, just because I haven't had so much exposure in football. But when they get an injury, a really bad, an ACL or something that really puts them out, there's a period of time where the whole world's a bit helpless and hopeless for them. And then you see the real difference in the character. So some people go, okay, so I can't do any of the things I want to do. So what can I do with this time? So they can sort their upper body out. They can finish all their uni work that they were going to do elsewhere. They can start working on their leadership or their relationships. So again, I just think that the person that compartmentalizes this and says, okay, this is the limitation, but what's the benefit, and how do I come out of this spell in a much better place? So yeah, I guess that's a similar thing of looking at the opportunity after the problem. So yeah, that would be me.
And I'll be really quick. Force the casual collisions, like I said, just like every day. Who could I speak to that might just give me a different perspective on the stuff I'm working on, and force it, because it isn't going to happen. You're not going to bump into somebody in the coffee shop or on the street or in the gym. So you've got to force it and push yourself out there. Don't just go for the obvious. Value loose. There's an expression in Silicon Valley, which is to value loose connections. We're brilliant at valuing strong connections. I've got a problem. Who's an expert on that? Actually, valuing loose connections is going, I've got a problem. Who could give me a perspective that's a bit different on that? So force those casual collisions, and then secondly, just think, be more deliberate about your thinking. Like that's what's going to be success in the future, whether it's sport or business. Technology and science is creating a very level playing field in lots of aspects of our game, whether that's development, training, analysis, etc. So to quote the founder of Wired magazine, the world isn't lacking knowledge and technology, it's lacking the imagination of what to do with it. And that's this time, to use your imagination and enjoy it, and see that as a good use of time. 2 hours having a good old think about something is what good leadership is going to be about in the future, not just getting stuff done.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kirk. Is Guy gone? Is he still there, Guy? Okay, I'll wrap it up then, I guess. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with the guys, and also I guess thanks to everyone else for joining in and contributing. We'll look to do more of these as we go through. Look, this is our first kind of go to try and support people in the game. I think what people would want to know is that we're here for them. So if people want to pick the phone up to anyone in the FA, I'm sure they're willing to have a conversation and chat, and I'm sure Patrick and Kirk would be similar in many regards. A big thank you from me, firstly, to Patrick and to Kirk for giving up their time of an evening to do this. They're both passionate guys about high performance and about people being at their best, and I think that came through clearly. So thank you for you guys filling up your time. Both Guy and myself will be in touch, I'm sure, in the future around events moving forward. But please, guys, stay safe. Think about that first and foremost, and hopefully we'll see everyone again soon.